All right, welcome back to the show. Today I'm diving into something both abstract and deeply real, the strange way that human beings hand over their lives, their communities, and their identities to symbols, systems, and structures that are, when you really think about it, completely made up. This is the story of how people become ideas and how ideas start to feel more real than people. So it's about disenchantment and abstraction. So what am I talking about when I say all that stuff? Is it just words? Well, in a way, words are just words. They are ideas that we're all putting out there into the world. That doesn't mean all words are equally as abstract. I mean, I guess abstract is a relative thing, but you have to always remember that whatever we're talking about, whatever images we're putting out into the world, they are just that. They're conceptual, they're ideas. And it's almost like a magic trick, you know? So there's some disenchantment in the world. We live in a time where governments, corporations, flags, and even churches can feel bigger than life itself. These abstractions are treated as though they're the ultimate reality, and yet they only exist because of us. When push comes to shove, I reject these inversions where humans and communities are turned into mere shadows of the concepts that claim to represent them. It's as if the real becomes fake so the fake can become real, or at least appear real. That's possibly a little bit of a distinction one could make. So the idea isn't new. I'm not claiming to have some revolutionary premise here. If everybody's, if they're in philosophy at all, they're picking apart reality. So sociologists have long pointed out that much of what we take as quote unquote reality is actually a social construction. That doesn't mean every social construction is wrong. It's just something that we should be aware of. Not every idea that we call reality is equally as bad or as fake. There's there's something to having ideas, they're not all equally bad. But when that construction requires endless human sacrifice of time, dignity, or even life itself, you have to ask, who is it really serving? So let's look at legitimacy and its limits. Here's the thing: not all organizations are equally destructive. Those with even a sliver of legitimacy recognize something crucial. Their power has limits. There's an old line: there is never a right time to do the wrong thing. Even governments, despite all their flaws, understand that without checks and balances, their own legitimacy crumbles. And it's why systems of accountability exist, at least on paper. They're acknowledgments of a truth we've seen across history. All power tends to corrupt, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And, I don't remember who came up with that quote, but it's a classic. And I think unchecked power becomes tyranny pretty easily, as we've seen throughout history. And tyranny, as Jefferson once said, can vanish only when people are enlightened, when they demand something better. So, checks, balances, and the test of crisis are really an important aspect of this whole topic as well. Checks and balances are the mechanisms we invent to keep power from eating itself alive, and really from eating us alive. But the real test of those systems isn't in calm times, it's in crisis, when institutions are challenged by economic collapse, digital disinformation, or public protest. That's when we find out whether checks and balances are living safeguards or just words on a page. Some governments use them to preserve freedom, and others use them as window dressing, giving the illusion of legitimacy while still functioning like carceral states, cataloging, surveilling, and disciplining their citizens. So, what about the consent of the governed? The concept is uh, is another classic idea. At the end of the day, legitimacy isn't just about institutional design, it's about the relationship between rulers and the ruled. A government that listens, adapts, and treats its citizens as partners earns trust. A government that silences, coerces, or manipulates breeds resentment. And resentment, left to fester, eventually breaks systems apart. That's no huge surprise. History is littered with regimes that collapsed, not because they lacked brute strength, but because they lost touch with the people they claimed to serve. As Václav Havel once argued in The Power of the Powerless, even small acts of resistance can reveal when the system's grip on legitimacy has slipped. So, what about looking beyond structures and toward the common good? Here's the takeaway, really, of what I'm talking about. Checks and balances matter, but they aren't enough. A truly legitimate organization or government must embody justice, equality, and the common good. It must evolve with its people. It must decentralize to the extent possible, allow bottom up participation, and make continuous adjustments in uncertain times. And above all, it must remain accountable, because otherwise power turns back into abstraction. It stops being about people and becomes about itself, an empty symbol sustained by sacrifice. And that's when systems collapse. So maybe the challenge for us right now is to refuse to let abstractions dictate reality, to insist that real human beings matter more than the flags, the corporations, or the bureaucracies that claim to represent them. And because if legitimacy doesn't serve people, it isn't legitimacy at all. So, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it, like it if it's on YouTube or social media or whatever, and keep questioning the abstractions around you. Until next time,